Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Adam, I always love to interview former fellow agency founders because I vibe with them. So you've gone from Disney to owning your own agency, well, being the CEO and M&A specialist. So what was the moment that pushed you into, I'm going to go all in consulting instead of staying into the awesome and stressful world that agency owner is?
That's a very good question, and thank you for having me. Look, running an agency is really exhilarating until it isn't. And I think what happens is you sort of get to a point where you've scaled a business, you spend an awful lot of time firefighting, and as you grow, your margins become immeasurably squeezed. You become obsessed with mitigating risk by diversifying your business, which just creates more of a portfolio business and an opportunity to fail. So scaling a business is really hard. And I think it is very typical for founders to become tired, to become frustrated. And, becoming a consultant gives you that freedom to take what you've learned and apply it to others. I mean, after selling my agency, I had a choice. I could, try and go back and build another 200-person machine, or I could potentially go back in-house. But for me, I wanted to work across multiple businesses without all of the baggage that comes with that, which is very, very refreshing. So I took a good look at my strengths, I asked for feedback, and I realized that in some respects, I was a very good agency leader, and in others, I had plenty of room for improvement. So what consulting allows me to do is to focus on my strengths, do the thing that I love the most, which is helping founders kind of get unstuck and make smarter decisions. And this way, I get to play across strategy, leadership, M&A, all of the levers that generate more value for a business without being dragged back into operational chaos. And that's the bit that I didn't love towards the end. I always said Way to Blue was a great business, but it was deeply complex. We were in every key territory. We worked across dozens of different sectors. We offered a full 360 approach across paid, earned, and owned. So when you're an all things to all people in all places business, you learn a lot. And so the opportunity now is passing on some of those learnings to others.
Oh, it's so funny because when you're saying this, I'm like, this is exactly the two crux that agencies have to solve, which is at the end of the day, probably the case for most businesses, but for some reasons, there are some complexities in the agency world. You first need to solve client acquisition, right? That's the first thing, like how do you acquire consistently and at scale clients? And once you do that, you're usually happy because money starts coming in, but then comes in the delivering at scale complexity. And this is where it's a people's business at the end of the day. Each business has its drawback, I guess. But I feel you. I see where you're coming from. So tell us a bit more about the problem that you're solving now. We just mentioned helping founders get unstuck, identify and use the levers that help them build more value for the business. What does that mean exactly? Like, what's the problem that you're solving now?
Well, I love creating value and then helping owners realize that value. And, I'm a little bit of a unicorn in the respect of I have worked client side, I have run an agency, and I have done a lot of deals on both buy and sell side. So I understand the full chain of what's required and how value is added. And it's that kind of sets me apart from some of the other people in the market that are delivering these types of services, who tend to be corporate brokers or financiers, and they are motivated by a transaction. I am motivated by a strategic partnership, something that's going to create that 1 + 1 = 3. The real problem I tend to find is that when I talk to most business owners, they can't really answer the question, why are you doing what you're doing? And that question can live operational in the lack of unique proposition that a business might have, or it can live more broadly in terms of what agencies and owners of agencies are trying to achieve. Are we trying to create something for value, or do we just want a lifestyle business that will pay the bills? And there is nothing wrong with either of those answers, but they are two very different answers that apply a very different lens over the business and the decisions you make. So I always want to start from the end. What are you trying to achieve, and how do we build backwards from there? I.e., how can we build a roadmap if we don't know where we're going? And this is why most agencies I work with, they're purely reacting to demand. They're not thinking strategically about value realization. They may think they have a sales issue or a margin issue, or they need more clients. But ultimately, it comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? How are you positioning the business? How can you drive your pricing and your gross profit per head up? And is there alignment at a leadership level? Are we all going in the same direction? And creating that alignment is really important. So, look, agencies rarely just have a margin issue. Margins are just a symptom of a business that doesn't really know what it is or who it serves or how to structure itself.
So how do you help them actually get clarity, actually like reverse engineer the whole process? Like, okay, say you want to sell your business for, I don't know, an 8 times EBITDA in 5 years. Cool. You want to like sell it for, I don't know, 15, 20 million. How do you help them achieve that? Once we're clear on the goal, how do you get there? You might be noticing that I'm just trying to pick your brain here.
Well, the first thing I'll do is I'll take a diagnostic view of the business. I'm a big picture guy. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to get into the operational detail, but I will take a big picture view of the business, and I will look at what's working and what isn't. Very simple traffic light system, but we are looking at these under the lens of how an acquirer would view a business, and we're considering it in terms of, how do we realize value, and how do we realize a greater multiple of our profit? And so the decisions that we set out and what I call strategic imperatives that we create for the business, they're all designed to grow the value of the business. So we will look at all of the different measures and levers that have an impact on that.
Makes sense. I think you've kind of answered the question already, but I'd like to get a better understanding of it also for the people listening to us. So you're helping agency owners, right? Obviously. Do you have a typical size that you look at? Do you have like a typical number of employees, industries? Like, do you see your services helping much more certain type of agencies? And there's multiple, really. There is video, there is ads, there is lead gen, there is demand, there is brand, whatever it is. How do you choose who you work with?
It's not a service thing. I've got pretty broad skills from a service point of view, because, as I said, my agency were all things to all people. It's more size, and I would say it's more values. So from a size perspective, it's typically 20 to up to about 150 people. I tend to work better with agencies that have enough scale to make meaningful change, but don't have so much bureaucracy that everything takes a year to decide. Probably somewhere between 3 and 25 million in revenues, founder-led, leaders who want to listen and are open to feedback, leaders who take more of a human and values-led approach. That's who I tend to work better with. So it's usually the CEO that will bring me in, or a corporate development team. And my clients tend to want to change one of three things. They want to look at growth, they want to look at better margins, and then they want clarity on whether they should buy, sell, or stay as they are.
How do you identify, or at what stage do you identify whether a founder or leader wants to listen, or I guess the term here is coachable, right? Before you start working with them, how are you able to identify that?
It's a really good question, and you can't always get it right. I'm not, I don't run my business in a way where I desperately need to fill capacity. So I am not accepting clients that don't fit my model. So the initial stages, which are effectively like dating, you are tracking chemistry, right? You are seeing whether you get on, whether you align, whether you see the world the same way. And I've done this for a long time now, to the point where I can see the red flags if they exist, or I can see if I'm genuinely going to get on with someone and ultimately add value, because I am here to add value. If I'm not adding value, I should not be working with that client. And I would be the first person to step down and say, I don't think this is working.
I respect that a lot. How do you get found by those people, Adam? And so I'm going to answer the obvious here. You have 169,000 followers on LinkedIn. I guess that helps. But overall, I mean, maybe that's from another life, right? Maybe that was when you had your agency. So how do those $3 to $25 million founders or leaders of agencies who are coachable and who are willing to listen, how do they find you? What has worked for you to attract those people?
Honestly, up until this point, a lot of it has been network. Okay. I have look, I've got two consulting businesses. I've got one that specializes in entertainment and one outside of entertainment. The one inside of entertainment, that world, I am very, very well connected. I know the clients, I know the agencies, I know the buyers. So I've made it my business to be as connected as possible in that world. And that has A, allowed me to add value to my clients, but B, it has also allowed me to reach out to people that I know and say, hey, I believe there's an opportunity here and I can help. Outside of entertainment, it's more challenging. I'm probably not as connected as I am in entertainment. So there has to be a degree of marketing, using that LinkedIn presence. And really with LinkedIn, for me, it's about saying the things that everyone else is too polite to say. I like being provocative, and I think you need to be provocative in order to make a point. I think you need to stay visible at all times. So consistency is everything. Some people only turn up when they need help. Really, you need to be consistent all the time. And really sort of leading with values, with value, not a pitch. So, you know, it's having those casual conversations and relating to people with the credibility you have through the experience you have.
Okay, so there are lots of things I want to double down on, because I think that's really, really important. So let's start with the networking, word of mouth. I think roughly 80-90% of the B2B coaches and consultants I talk to are mainly relying on referrals, which is in a sense not a bad thing. It's just like they do a good work, people talk about it, they get more business. That's how it works. For you, Adam, because I mean, you've done an exit with an agency, so I'm sure you've worked or thought about acquisition channels. How do you double down on this network effect? How do you develop new referral partners? How do you make sure people talk about you? Like, do you have a specific strategy to make this happen? Or is it just whoever comes?
I haven't needed to do that so much. Now, I've only been consulting really for, God, must be nearly 4 years now. And I always expected in the first 2 years I would use my network. In the next 2 years, I'd use my network's network. And then after that, I'd have to go out and start, cold calling. It hasn't really worked out that way. I'm still on my network, which is hopefully speaks to, the quality of my network. I think it also speaks to the market. Certainly on the entertainment side of my practice, the market is, I don't want to use the word disarray, but let's use the word unstable. And when things are so unstable, people need help and support. When margins are being squeezed and the business is not quite achieving its former glories, it needs people that can come in and help get the business back to where it was. So I've been very fortunate in the sense of I tend to get called by people that know me or know of me, or I get referrals, as you say. And that's what drives my business. I'm not yet at the point where I'm having to go out there and knock on doors and say, you may not know me, but I can help. But, I have no question of a doubt that time is coming at some point.
Oh, that does make sense. Another thing I wanted to dig a little bit further into. When you're saying things on LinkedIn that everybody is too polite to say, can you give us an example of that? The reason I'm asking you this is a lot of B2B coaches and consultants will start doing content on LinkedIn, writing on LinkedIn. The thing is, anybody can be an expert nowadays on LinkedIn, especially with lovely LLMs and ChatGPT of the sorts. So I think standing out on LinkedIn is a good strategy. There is much more that needs to go into it, like doing DMs, warm DMs, even cold DMs sometimes. But for you, like what has worked for the entertainment side of things when it comes to making bold statements and bold posts that gets the right attention?
Well, I'm calling things the way I see them,
Okay.
and some people may disagree with that. And actually, I think healthy debate is very positive. But for example, I did a post recently where I was saying that the difference between the best agencies and the worst agencies is negligible. I don't think you win necessarily on great work. I think you win on relationships. And it's something that a lot of agency owners don't necessarily understand. And at times I didn't. I tried to create a model where we could create economies of scale and values and value, and we could have conversations with procurement teams and prove to them that our model was going to be more efficient and effective than any other agency. The reality is, I don't think that stuff matters anywhere nearly as much as agency owners thinks it does. What really matters is the relationship. And that is essential. So I will call things the way I see it, and it might be a little uncomfortable, but it may also lead people to start thinking, well, perhaps we haven't been doing this the right way.
So please develop on that. What do you mean with what matters is the relationship? The relationship with whom, how, when? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, for me, the relationship and the human connection is essential to every element of what we're delivering. I mean, I'm talking mostly the relationship between agency and client, right? My family background is the advertising world. My father ran an advertising agency. My brother ran an advertising agency. They truly understand the value of relationships, and it's something that I've really taken on from that. But it's not purely external; it's internal too. I think as a leader and as an owner, you need to listen. You need to be an active listener. You need to really work on your relationships with your teams and not just be prescriptive or dictatorial or tell people what's happening. You need to listen, you need to hear, and you need to know that if there are challenges or problems in the organization, anyone can knock on your door at any time and tell you, and then we can co-author a solution to that issue.
So tell us a bit more about your sales cycle, Adam. You you build your network, you tap into your network, people come to you for the entertainment space, you create content, you stay visible. I liked what you said about consistency, by the way. How do you go from, okay, you're visible to the right person, you get introduced to the right person. How do you move from this to an initial chat, a follow-up conversation, SOW, letter of engagement, we rock and roll? What does the sales motion look like for you?
Well, like I said earlier, I think initially it's chemistry, right? So it is, those early conversations are simply chemistry checks. If the chemistry is there and the need and the desire to work with someone that delivers the type of work I do is there, then we'll formalize a scope. And we'll agree what that looks like. For me, I'm often working towards something, whether that is an exit or a growth plan. I'm working towards something. So I will take that brief and I will split it into disparate parts. I'll create strategies behind each one, and then I'll create a system that keeps everyone accountable. So my job really is identifying what those strategic imperatives are, and they're mostly around driving the multiplier, managing expectations, because a lot of my clients, well, I'm yet to work with a client that has a realistic expectation of the value of their business. And that is just, that's an ongoing issue. It's not a problem. It's totally understandable. But I think managing those expectations at the outset is very important. And then driving value in everything I do, creating that 1 + 1 = 3. So I have a pretty fair idea of who I want to work with. I will either reach out to them or they will reach out to me. And then we'll figure out whether there is a cultural alignment and an alignment in terms of how I can add value for their business.
Back to one of the things that you said earlier around, let me fetch the exact wording. You want to work with people who won't take a year to decide. How do you make your client, because I think, so the reason I'm asking this, B2B coaches and consultants, that's one of the main things, right? Very long sales cycles, multiple stakeholders, multiple decision makers. Yes, business case makes sense and so on. It's a heavy investment though, so things are getting delayed. Things take time. How do you identify a founder or a leader who is just trying to get the right approval in-house versus one that is just going to stall for a year? And how do you, if at all, create the right amount of urgency so that people actually take action? How do you do that?
It's a challenge for sure. But, I have these conversations at the outset. There's never a surprise really later on, because we've all been very clear about what we're trying to achieve. Ultimately, if people want to employ me as an advisor, so let's call it a growth advisor, that's a very clear task. It's very clear what I am there to do. If they want to employ me as an M&A advisor or practitioner, again, there's a very clear endpoint. Things can become murky if things out of our control come into play, but that's the same for any business. We're always trying to adapt and be as nimble as we can be. But I'm pretty clear with my clients about what it is we're trying to achieve. That it's very clear in the strategic imperatives that we create what it is we're trying to achieve. We have clear accountability built into the process. So, it's rare that there are surprises further on down the line, that someone really isn't aligned with, what this process is trying to create.
Like that. When I was a consultant myself, Adam, one of the things that the partner said at the time, the one who kind of taught me everything, he was like, there are two types of consultants. There are the hunters and there are the farmers. And he was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. That's my job. And he was like, but the partners making the most money, the ones bringing in the most business, are actually the farmers. The ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over deliver, maybe sometimes at loss, but then transform this into a multi-layered, multi-year projects feeding other teams from PwC. Those are the ones who make the most money. How do you farm?
That's a really good question. Well, look, that's the kind of Accenture management consultant model, right? You want to be deeply embedded inside a client to the point where it becomes very difficult to fire you. I'm not trying to become deeply embedded here. I'm on a 1 to 3 year journey, right? I don't want to work for my clients for 10 years because, quite frankly, why would they want to hire a consultant for 10 years? There's only so much value you can add. And the sort of value that I'm adding happens in a reasonably short time period. That suits me and it suits my clients. So my farming is delivering against my objectives, right? I want to sell my business. I want to sell it. I would like to achieve X amount in value realization, or I want to achieve a multiple growth of Y. How do I get there? That's my farming, is getting them to that point. But I'm with you on the hunting. I love the hunting. I absolutely love the hunting. And I totally agree with the principle of what your former colleague said. There do tend to be hunters and farmers, and rarely are there strong hunters who can farm also. I would say naturally, I'm more of a hunter, but I've had to farm. I've had to roll my sleeves up and get them dirty, running an agency and working client side and all that stuff. I like rolling my sleeves up, but the real thrill comes from the hunt.
You strike me a bit as a hunter, madam. Look, that does make sense. You focus on, so it's a bit back to what you were saying at the beginning, which I like because it's very much aligned with what seems to be your mission, right? I mean, what is your mission? It's, let's start with the end. What's the goal? Okay, I'm going to help you achieve that goal, period. And we're going to take as long as it takes to get there. But if it takes 10 years to, grow a business or like make it valued at a multiple of what we want, probably doing something wrong. It needs to happen in a bit of a shorter period of time. That's the whole point.
Yes.
A bit of a curveball.
Can I just say that there are some critical things here that are what drive me, and I'm very much driven by my own experience, right, of selling my agency, of how that process went, of the impact it had on me and my health, and the incongruency against my values, right? I am trying to create a system here that is going to challenge all of those things. I am fed up of hearing from owners that have sold their business and had an unhappy experience. It shouldn't be an unhappy experience. And there are very clear reasons as to why that is. And I'm trying to re-engineer that process to make it better for all. Because with the view that if it works better for sellers, it will also work better for the buyer. And also, I'll come back to the health thing and the incongruency against my values. I got very sick selling my business, and I don't want that to happen to other people. So I'm going in with a very true, very real, very personal story. And I am telling people that I'm going to help prevent it from happening to them. And that's what makes it authentic. And I think that's where a lot of consultants struggle a bit, because they're looking at a transaction. They're looking at a financial return, but I'm also looking at a people return.
Back to the values that you were highlighting at the beginning,
Yeah.
and how you
Yeah.
decide to work. I like that. A bit of a curveball for you, Adam. Where are you challenged right now? What's the goal, and how are you working on that goal?
Where am I challenged right now?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Who coaches the
who coaches the
coach?
coach? Who coaches the coach? Love that. Well, it's a very good question. I have always viewed myself as a work in progress. I am not afraid to say that I'm in therapy, or that I have coaches or anything like that,
Me too.
or mentors. I need them just as much as anyone else needs them. So I have my own support network. Where I am challenged right now is pretty much what everyone else is feeling. It's the state of the market. And the market is probably a lot worse than it looks from the outside. A lot of people feel very unstable. A lot of people are concerned economically, racially, socially, politically. It is leading to a lot of shakiness around risk, and it's driving risk adversity. So, it's the same thing for me. When the market is that way, that is going to reflect on my ability to do what I think works for clients. Because if I have a certain risk profile and it's very different to my client's risk profile, again, we're not necessarily aligned, because we can't take the risks that I think are required in order to generate future value.
That would make sense. Okay, let me play the game here. Say you deal with an agency in the 500K, a million a year mark, 2 years in business, who wants to 10x the business. What would you do?
500 million pound revenue mark or profit mark?
So 1 million pounds to 10 million pounds. Classic agency margins.
Right. Well, look, in order to get from 1 to 10, you've got to invest, right? And you've got to take some risks. The opportunity for me right now is market consolidation. The market from an agency point of view is just too big. There's too many agencies. There's not enough work. There's not enough margin to go around. Overheads are out of control, so costs are spiraling. And the market is becoming less interested. If you're a PE firm, why would you invest in an agency? There are other ways to get a return on your investment a lot quicker. So the opportunity really right now is consolidation. It's bringing businesses together. And I've always believed that collective unity is better than individual risk. So my focus right now, especially in the world of entertainment, which is really feeling it, is consolidating the market. That's the opportunity. So to get from 1 to 10, whether that's top line or bottom line, you're probably going on some form of acquisition journey. And you may not have the cash to be able to acquire or consume a business, but you may be able to acqui-hire teams into your business, look for opportunities to take teams, to take clients, to own relationships, and build from there. So really, it's looking at opportunities within the market and where you can make small deals that can have a big impact.
Interesting. Adam Rubins, ladies and gentlemen. Adam, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Have a website, wearethearc.com, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Adam Rubins.
We'll put all the links in the description. I don't even know if you can still accept connection requests with 169,000 followers, but I can say this for sure. You've gained at least one from this interview. Me.
Thank you.
I just added you. Adam, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Same here.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How was that, Adam?
Yeah.